secure functioning means that that we can set the relationship up any way we want. It's our design,
Mm.
our gig. This is our culture. We just have to agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying not everybody would agree, which means they'd have to work it out.
There goes a sight from my soul. Welcome to the Inspired Evolution. It is such a treat to be here today. We have with us Dr. Stan Tatkin. Stan, how are you?
I'm fine, Amrit. It's nice to meet you.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. For those tuning in to Stan for the first time, he's a clinician, researcher, teacher, developer of a psychobiological approach to couples therapy, affectionately known as PACT. It's a polytheoretical nonlinear approach to dyadic systems, which I'm hoping to understand a little bit more because that term doesn't mean too much to me just yet, that integrates developmental neuroscience, arousal regulation, and attachment theory. Now, I know I've tuned into a lot around attachment theory and stuff, so there's bits and pieces in there that I know a little bit around. There's bits and pieces in there that I'm not completely familiar with, but it is such a treasure to have you here today because your TED Talks and your videos online and just, exploring I was going to say the beast that is relationships in some way, but that already has us starting on certain connotations, which I probably should keep the slate pretty clean. Just helping us tackle the beast. It's a real privilege to have you.
Thank you. The beast, that is the thing we need. We can't seem to do without relationships, can we?
It is really profound, that, isn't it? I having done so many podcasts and so many different avenues on so many different topics, it always obviously your work is, like a part of it is based on intimate relationships, but also I find even like random things like longevity and health and mental health and well-being underneath, like there's so much more research going into it now that underneath all of that, the foundational sort of bedrock of our well-being in so many different dimensions is this sense of deep social connection. It's like we're wired for it.
Yeah, absolutely, we're wired for it. A longitudinal study, at least in this country, from the 30s, called the Grant Study. That's from Harvard Medical School. Showed very early that the secret to happiness, longevity, and good health is at least one secure functioning relationship in one's life. That means somebody that I can depend on with my life, and they reciprocally can do that with me. And that's what we need, all things being equal, which they're rarely not equal. Genetics and being hit by a bus and things like that. But now we do know for sure that we need relationships in order to be happy, healthy, and to live a good life.
Stan, do you ever look back at, I guess this is me reaching for some context. Do you ever look back at potentially, well, the child, in the Stan that was 10, maybe 13, and look at him and go, oh, he was always going to be doing this sort of work in the world? Like, where did this work come from for you?
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me because I was a very awkward, shy kid, and really felt very much like an outsider in school. And I think I lived a lot in fantasy, and that may have turned out good for me. I don't know, but I really felt the need to be of use to people, to be needed, and to have a function in the world where I could care for people. I thought that might have been a doctor when I was that age, but actually I was in music. I was in music business as a professional musician for most of my young life until I was around 26. So to be doing what I'm doing is a little bit of a head scratcher, considering from where I've come, but it makes sense still that I would be doing what I'm doing. I just would never have known it.
Yeah, I always find the again and again, I just find on the Inspired Evolution, it's our biggest challenges that form our biggest gifts to the world. And your
Yes.
work is profound. And it's just, I think for the audience listening, and it's always helpful to hear, especially when we're going through challenges ourselves, that there's a reason we're going through the hero's journey in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I often don't know until looking backward. It's the fog of the future, or fog of the present. We can't really tell where we're going until we've gone. And then looking back, it starts to make sense.
Can I ask a little bit about PACT, psychobiological approach to couple therapy? What do you mean by psychobiological, and how does that really? Because it is, yeah. I don't want to frame it. You tell me.
Psychobiology is the study of the mind, the body, the brain,
and the interplay between the two, right?
and the interplay between the two of them. So it's a developmental, approach. Actually, we study infant brain development and child brain development and brain development throughout the lifespan, as well as attachment, organization, and arousal systems like the autonomic nervous system. So those three things really form psychobiology as I define it, at least. And that's the PACT approach. Those three main sciences or disciplines of study, research, really form what PACT is, the bones of it.
Yeah. And anchoring it towards couple therapy, why is it so important to use this approach towards understanding how we navigate our most intimate relationships between one and another, like the love of our life potentially?
Well, there's nothing harder on the planet than another person, isn't there? I mean, right? People are the hardest. And so this is really about studying relationships, in our case, a two-person psychological system. But it could be polyamory, it could be more, it could be, ethical, non-monogamous relationships, which include more people. But generally speaking, we pair bond in twosomes. Human primates. That's what we do. We're herd animals that pair bond. So that is from the very, very beginning with our first dependency relationship, our caregiver or caregivers. And it all starts from there in terms of how secure we feel in that relationship. Has a big impact on how we will perform and be in later relationships as well. So there are a lot of other factors, but that's one of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned that a lot throughout. Well, from my research into your work, what I've found is this piece of safety is fundamental to what you've described again and again in your work. And I think we sort of, it sounds, once I've been normalized to the idea, it makes a lot of sense. But once I remember the first time I was exposed to sort of coming across this in your work, I was like, safety doesn't seem like it's the most, like, it makes sense from a theoretical point of view, but when you start feeling into how much of it you go into a relationship based on feeling, based on emotion, I don't look at someone and go, "Ooh, that's going to make me feel real safe." Like I don't associate the cues of attraction with safety as being my sort of gut feeling. So can you unpack that a little bit? Because we normally get it.
Yeah. Nature doesn't really guide us with relationship. Nature wants us to, to procreate, wants us to, wants the species to continue. And so we first meet somebody, we're, flooded with endogenous drugs that make us go, wowza. That's nature's way of saying, mate, or not. But that's the way of nature. We live longer today than we ever have. And so now we care about relationship and constancy and stability and so on. But there was a time when it didn't matter because we weren't going to live very long anyway. Or Or
Yeah.
we would have a baby, and then after about 4 years, we would split up and mix up the gene pool until we died,
Mm.
and that's nature. So safety and security becomes a relevant issue when we unionize, when we form alliances based on survival, right?
Mhm.
We'll group with other people to survive, uh, and no different with a partner, right? It's about survival first and then thriving. And so then it really matters, because a system that's unsafe or too insecure is going to have problems, right? People are not going to be happy.
Mm.
This is about human happiness. This is not about, continuation of the species.
Yeah. It's interesting at this particular juncture because we are living longer than we've ever lived before in some ways, arguably. And the interesting dynamic that that brings then into our relationships, when you said, like, they're some of the most complicated things we'll ever be invested in. Um, yeah, maybe, like, do you ever find yourself questioning the longevity that is now demanded upon our current intimate relationships?
No, not anymore. I'm an older man, so I kind of been around the block, and I know I know what it's like to have flitted about and experimented and been with different people. I like the stability of being with one person, my preference. I like choosing, like a career, choosing one thing that I'm going to pour all my intentions and attention on
Mm.
as self-discovery, right?
Mm.
We pick one thing, otherwise we don't know anything, right? If we're spread out too much. So to each his own. Not everybody wants that. Not everybody is even monogamous. And so this is really about, create your own adventure. PACT is about that. It's about two people creating out of whole cloth something that does not exist in real life except in our heads, a relationship.
Mm.
Uh, right? And you and I are going to create something. We just got to make sure that we're creating the same thing, or we'll fight. We have to make sure that we're envisioning the same idea, and
Mm.
then we have to build it in order to be able to live in it without killing each other.
And is that vision pertaining purely to how we interact with one another, or is that bigger than that? Is it also where we're going in life, what our goals are, what our finances, what our environment, what our family structure looks like? Is it?
Yeah, it's a structure. It's an organization. It's with a hierarchy. It should be us
Mm.
and not others, right? How we build it is also how we're going to fare as partners, right? As an alliance. So it's really also about how we're going to do business,
Mm.
how we're going to settle disputes, how we're going to um, build a relationship set of ethics or ethos. What do we both say we're going to do, and what do we both say we're never going to do?
Mm.
It's a deal or no deal kind of a situation, right? It's not based on feeling. It's based on purpose, terms, and conditions, as it should be with two adults that are of equal power and authority. They have to work together or they won't work.
Mm. What do you say to the offhanded remark that that sounds like it's not impregnated with the emotions that bring two people together, and it sounds more contractual?
Well, it is emotion and feelings that bring us together, but it should not be emotion and feelings that set up shop or decide how we're going to keep it fair, just, and sensitive.
Mm.
There's a social contract issue here.
Mm.
So if it's just feeling, well, feeling comes and goes. I'm not going to feel the same thing about you next week as I do right now. I don't know how I feel, but it'll probably be different. I
Mhm.
can't say I'll feel the same way about you in a year. I may not like you in a year,
Mm.
but we're still together, right?
Mm.
I could be in my 40s, and by then I'm looking for other options because, I'm afraid of death, and I'm afraid this is all there is, and I want more. All these things can happen because of emotion and feeling, but that doesn't really create a solid, stable union or alliance. Only purpose does. Shared vision, shared ideas, what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, right? That's the only thing that will last. So if you're not interested in a relationship that will last, you do whatever you want.
So, a long-term strategy for safety and attraction is purpose and vision. How do you go about helping people establish a vision slash a purpose together in their life?
Well, vision usually comes from we're creating something. We're not, right?
Mm.
You and I are embarked in a partnership to solve problems, not each other, solve problems, and create things that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to do alone, but we can do it together.
Mm.
And so, as long as that is our vision, we create things, we solve problems, we protect each other in public and private. We're the center of the universe. It's us against the world. Our relationship comes first before all other people and all other things, because all other things and people depend on us being in good shape.
Mm.
So it's thought through in terms of why we're even doing this. Because if we forget, we could just give up. And so that's the same with any team or group or organization. You have to get people on board by wanting the same things and pointing in the same direction. We're going to win. We're going to make a lot of money. We're going to have a great family. We're going to survive at all costs, right? We're going to, whatever it is. We have a shared idea. We're not just hanging out,
Mm.
right? And so that's the way small and large systems work. If you're going to bring people together, unless it's a dictatorship or slavery, in which case, it's you do it because I say so.
Yeah. It's interesting because as I'm hearing you share this, I think it's all stuff that we apply, and obviously running my own business, it's all the kind of stuff that I apply to my business. And I feel completely fine not making emotion-based decisions in my business where it's like, this is what the numbers say, or this is what, where we're at the moment. And obviously I base a lot of my decision making on my intuition as well. But then also what feels right and feels good. But also very heavily informed by, just what the terms and conditions should be, what my ideals are, what my values are, where I think things want to go. And when you're sharing it about relationships in this conversation, it makes a lot of sense. But I do find outside of this conversation, without your presence here, it feels like, wait, that it doesn't sound as intuitive to sort of set things up. I just don't find we approach our relationships in the same sort of structured fashion. Even myself, like me and my wife, we've been together. We've been married for about 2 years, but we've been together for almost 12 years now. Touch wood, and it's really interesting. Like, we'll have these conversations sometimes, and we just find little discrepancies where she's visioning this for her future and I'm visioning this for our future, and they're not necessarily aligned. And it's like, oh, we should really sit down and have a chat about this, because
You really should, because if you're pointing, go where we point. And so if you're pointing in different directions, that will be a problem, right? You're going to make decisions according to where you are envisioning. That's why you want to make sure you're on the same page, right? You want to, get consensus, attract each other, sell each other, bargain with each other, to get each other on the same page, so that you're working together. You're not working at cross purposes.
And it's fascinating. I remember tuning into bits of relationship advice in the past, and people say it's really important to figure out, like where you stand on certain fundamental issues, like whether you want to have children, where you would like to live, what sort of, percentage of time you're going to allocate to being a hustler and working in the world versus how much more important is family to you. And it's okay, like as long as you've got that somewhat clear and mapped out between each other and that it's okay with you. And I used to be a bit more rose-tinted glasses and say, yeah, but love's enough. Love finds a way. And after you have kids, you start to realize, that's a big one, actually. Like, it's really important to realize, because I've got dear friends in my life that, one is super itchy to have kids and another person is not, unfortunately. Well, fortunately for them, or unfortunately, I can't say.
Yeah.
Neither is better or worse. But they're completely in love and they've spent so much time with each other now. They've been together for, 5 years, maybe longer, 6 years. But unfortunately, not being able to agree on those sort of terms,
Right.
the investment is so painful on the other side of that now.
So someone like me who does this work day in and day out and has done it for a very long time, that's called a deal breaker. A deal breaker is something that we both want. I want to do drugs. You want a sober life. Neither of us are wrong, but can we live together? I want a child. You never want children. I want to raise our child Muslim. You want to raise your child, our children Catholic. Right? Both are right, but how are we going to get each other on the same page? We may not be able to. Unfortunately, the human condition is to kick the can down the road, right?
Yeah.
And that's not good because eventually things, the time will come when that person is going to throw down and say, I've got to have children. And the other person says, I can't. And that's a big problem. And that's when they come to therapy many times. But that could have been taken care of earlier. Unfortunately, we don't do that because the attachment system is actually a biological mandate that tells us, I can't quit you. It's not emotional. It's not love. I mean, it is emotional, but it's not love. We confuse it with love. It's survival. It is existential threat. That if I lose you, there's a feeling of death. And so that makes me do a lot of crazy things that I shouldn't do, or that might not be very fair because of the I can't quit you biology. But yet your friends, I hope they work it out, but they should really take care of that as soon as possible so that they don't, it doesn't end up a cancer cell that's going to get them.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way you described it then is it's much more survival based than love based after a certain point. Is it after a certain point or is it always a survival?
We're survival first. Survival first. Even our brain tilts to the negative from birth for survival purposes. If I don't have positive data coming through, I'm going to assume the worst. If I don't hear you say something and there's a big blank space, I'll fill it in with the most negative thing. That's the way our brains work. And not only that, how easy is it for us to hurt each other, misunderstand each other, get it wrong, step on each other's toes? If we don't fix it right away, we start to accrue threat memory, which begins to become biological. So these are things we've come to know over the millennia of dealing with each other, which is why we have things in place like apologies, making the amends, falling on your own sword. That's saved many a country from war, people from being sued or families from breaking up, right? And yet a lot of people still don't do that. So there are things to understand about the human condition if you want to be in a relationship that will last a long time, that have to be respected and understood. Otherwise, we'll do what everyone on the planet does: shoot first, ask questions later.
Not the best strategy.
No, it's not really even a strategy. It's our survival impulse to protect ourselves and our interests if we feel threatened, and our kid can make us feel that way.
You mentioned that we're here to solve problems potentially as part of our co-created vision and purpose, but not each other.
Right. People make the mistake of working on each other rather than working on the problem or the solution. Right.
Can you tell more about that, please?
You and I are working out something, and as soon as I start working on you, I can expect war, because working on you compels you to protect yourself and your interests, which will then compel me to do the same. So this is done without realizing it if we're not two-person oriented, meaning I know that you and I are interdependent if we choose to be. We have the same things this is what it means. We have the same things to gain and the same things to lose. We have equal parity. That's what keeps us honest, right? And that's what makes us interdependent. Anything other than that would be dependency or codependency, right? Not having equal stakes. So be that is true, right? Since that is true, we have to think like a two-person system of win-win. I can't afford for you to lose, because if you do, I will pay the price. I can't afford to do something to you that makes you feel hurt, insecure, or unsafe, because I will pay for that. So it is a higher moral level of self-interest, but it's self-interest that includes you, right? I can't really do anything without making sure you are okay. Otherwise, again, I will pay for that. So this people know who've been cop car partners, or in the military, or in a dance troupe, or we have to work together or we do not make it. So right. You and I have to make sure we both win, and that's hard to do under stress. Hard to do under stress, because as soon as we get under stress or feel the least bit threatened, we tend to revert to a one-person orientation.
Turn inward.
Me, my, I, and you. And that's where we all get into trouble. Yeah.
And so in those instances where we are stressed and we start to turn inward, is there some strategies that we can allow ourselves to sort of, is it just a matter of taking space and not engaging in that moment and going for a walk, taking time out, disconnecting from the engagement at that particular point in time?
The goal, the opposite of that, is to stay engaged, but learn how to be experts on each other and to know the animal you're with, so that I know what to do if you start to get out of sorts. I know how to return you to safety, and you know how to do that with me, because it's easy to split up and take time out. But it doesn't work as well, because we don't actually recover well by ourselves. We recover well only with another person really fast, as long as the conditions are right.
Right.
In fact, we do everything better with other people than we do alone. But the conditions have to be correct for the person that is, or the persons that are involved. So it's a skill, and it's an understanding of how our brains and our bodies work. And many of us really don't know this.
And everybody would be different, I imagine, as well.
Everybody is different, but there are only so many differences in people. When it comes to nervous system operations and attachment, there's only so many variations, even across cultures, right? So people are people in the sense that everyone knows what it feels like when there's injustice or unfairness, right? Even children. And we know that people cross-culturally can actually work together, prosper, get along, as long as they understand they're different and respect the differences and know how not to be threatening. Right. That's the key. And that takes a little bit more of a social emotional intelligence.
It does, because you've got to understand that the other person is not the same makeup as you, and that what threatens you doesn't necessarily threaten them, but they may be triggered by something completely different.
And they will be, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's a team sport.
Mm.
Two separate individuals that have the same things at stake. You go down, I go down. Right. So we've got to work together, kind of like if we were if our legs were bound together, the inner legs were bound together. If that were the case, we'd have to work together.
Mm.
Otherwise, we wouldn't go anywhere. We
Yeah.
wouldn't do anything, right? Or a potato sack race, we wouldn't win. We just,
Mm.
as we argue, and everybody else wins. That's
Yeah.
what happens, yeah.
Are there too many to list in terms of the different types of sort of responses that we have? Or are there some generic ones that you can sort of articulate in terms of what sort of signs and symptoms we can see in each of those situations?
Well, the big response systems either fight, freeze, or faint, right? Fight or flee, rather. Fight, freeze, flee, or faint. Those are our major responses, universal.
Right.
But so if I get threatened, I'm either going to be aggressive and fight, or I'll run. If I've been traumatized in my life, I may faint or still. But the kinds of things that are going to threaten us are going to be small things, like the way you turned your head. Why did you do that? What does that mean to me? I recognize that. I don't like that. The way you said that word, the way you just made that sound, your movements, your non-movements, what you said, what you didn't say. Right, the sound of your voice, your eyes, the way they're moving. I don't like that. All of these things we tune into, especially when we are committed to each other. That's when the fun starts. That's when we become proxies for everybody who's ever hurt us and everybody that's ever, right? It's a long memory, which is why these relationships are really hard.
You talk about the work being psychobiological. How much, when you start talking about a long memory, I've done some work recently and we had some really interesting conversations on the podcast about how the body seems to hold emotional memory quite robustly. Whereas the conscious mind seems to be a bit more flitty, sort of flits between things and sort of remembers, like, if you were like, what did you eat last Thursday for dinner? And it's like, it's just like, I can't really go there. But then, there's these certain things that the body seems to retain as memory quite well. Is that your finding as well? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, it's called implicit memory or somatic memory or procedural memory. The other part is declarative memory, and that is more of the domain of the left hemisphere, especially in the upper left. And most everything else is stored in the right, which is nonverbal or pre-verbal or simply somatic. And this is called implicit memory. And most of our interactions are happening below the level of consciousness or awareness, let's say, and it's happening through nonverbal cues, verbal cues, and nonverbal memory. Since we're memory animals, everything we do is by memory. There's very, very little time in any given day that we actually spend using the really expensive areas of our neocortex, which are energy consuming, which is why we don't. In biology, organisms are energy conserving, meaning that we do the least amount necessary.
Nice and lazy.
It's just nature.
Yeah.
I don't use the high caloric, number crunching area of my brain unless I really have to, and I don't like it. And so we're automatic, reflexive, memory-based, with lightning fast recognition systems that see that smirk on your face and start to feel threatened. And that's how we roll. If we don't understand that, we might think there's something wrong with our partner when there really isn't. This is all of us.
Yeah. And so especially with that memory based, and we start generating meaning based on our experience rather than what's the situation at hand, we run the risk of interpreting the situation based on our past rather than what's actually happening in the present moment.
Yes, and we base it. It's called a narrative, right? So we build our personal narratives, forgetting that that those narratives are oriented toward the self, protecting our own interests. It doesn't really include the other person. So here's how it is with the human being. I'm unhappy and I don't know why, and then I remember, oh yeah, it's you. That's how we are. And so I can build a narrative of all the things that you do and why you're so difficult. It's not true. It's only a little true. But that's all we need to survive and to protect our interests, right? And so again, this is part of the human condition. We mostly don't know what we're doing at any given time because real time is actually too fast for consciousness. Therefore, we're mostly automatic through the day, mostly automatic without even realizing it.
Sorry, I was about to interrupt. Please continue. Yeah.
No, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's what you're alluding to at the moment is what I sort of hear in some of my communities. They say your relationships are a mirror for you. Have you heard that term before in that phrase?
Sure, yeah.
And is this kind of where we're coming to? Is what you've just alluded to? Is there's something wrong with me, and then I like to sort of you're what's wrong with there's that. Yeah, is this kind of
It's externalizing problems, right? I usually don't look to what I did. I look to what you did. I should be looking to what I did. Not to beat myself up, but to take responsibility for my end of the relationship. That's the proper way to do it. But it's a hard thing for us to do when under stress because we revert to caring for our own interests. We have to be oriented to a two-person system to where I have to keep you in mind at all times as I keep myself in mind. Very hard to do, right? If you're feeling good, it's a little easier. But I have to think of you at the same time I'm thinking of me, or you will confuse me as unfriendly. That's the formula if you want to really know.
Do you start by putting the other person's interest in front of you at a certain point, or is that also toxic?
We're of equal importance. I have to please you as I have to please myself. I have to keep myself safe and you at the same time. It's not an either or, it's and. Most of us are not oriented that way. We're concerned about ourselves first, and that leads us to be unfriendly appearing, and then we fight. Right? We just fight. That's not a way to build consensus. It's not a way to assure another person and keep them safe enough to influence them. So here's how it works. If I start to get overly excited in a bad way, my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up, and I'm starting to feel unsafe with you, you can no longer influence me. You can't. I'm not here for that. The only way you can influence me is to return me to safety in some way, which you can do if you're skillful very quickly. I have to do that with you. So if I don't know how that works, I'm never going to get anything I want with you. I'm not going to be very persuasive because I'm using a stick to get what I want, not attraction to get what I want. So we're talking about a higher level of social emotional intelligence again, where we have to operate at a different level of thinking, right? Morally, we are responsible for each other. You're in my care, I'm in your care. That's how it works best.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the question that emerges for me then is, how do we start to find that equal pairing of vested interest in one another? But before I simply ask that question, it's intriguing because there's been moments in my life where I feel like personally, from my experience, I've made certain decisions, and I'd like to sort of get you to weigh in on your thoughts on the practical application of what I think feels like that, and whether I don't want to say nailed it, or how far off the mark, or how well within the mark your opinion of it is, because I think it'd be more illustrative with a bit of an example. So there was a period in my life where both my wife and I were going through a bit of an existential crisis with our work. It was actually the year the Inspired Evolution was birthed, so that was a real gift. And she's a dentist by qualification, and she just felt that in this period of her life that there's got to be more to life than just filling holes in people's teeth. It's just there was just that sort of moment, and so she had this initial, I want to go traveling.
By the way, how old was she when she had that epiphany?
28. It's a
Oh,
Saturn,
that's
around that
not,
Saturn's return sort of period that people talk about. And yeah, so it was about, yeah. So we look back and sort of knowing a little bit about what people call the Saturn's return. Is like, oh, that must be definitely what was in effect for us. And so she decided she wanted to go traveling for a year. She just knew in her bones that traveling was something she wanted to do. Um, and at the time, it wasn't so much that, hey, like, yeah, I'm gonna come travel with you. It was like she was like, yeah, I just need to go travel on my own. I can feel it would be like not the antidote, but sort of not even the answer, but it's what's calling me out of this situation that I'm in. And I distinctly remember at the time that yeah, there was people that were like, "Oh, so she's going to go traveling," and my initial response was like, "Absolutely! Like, if that's what you need." Long before I had these podcast conversations, long before I had personal development books in my life, traveling was this incredible vessel vehicle in my life. I'd go to a new environment, I'd learn so much about myself. It was incredibly enriching and self awareness instilling that. Yeah, I absolutely fell in love with it, and I was like, if that's what is calling you, like, go! Like, this would be so amazing. And she was like, "But you're not going to miss me." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm going to miss you, but like, you'll be back, you know." Um, and so there was that conversation. I remember even her family sort of saying, "Oh yeah, like that's fine. You can go. Just check with Amrit." And I remembered clearly they were thinking that being her partner, I would have been the one that's like, "No, no, 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 you can't go." And I was like, "Yeah, she should go." And then they started expressing their concerns a little bit. They're like,
don't you hear?
yeah, like, wait,
My,
you're actually.
my first thought is, of course, you're Australian. New Zealand Australians are known for getting the hell out of Dodge and traveling.
Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah, very much so. We can. It's interesting when you go traveling as an Aussie and you go halfway across the world just to meet other Australians that live like 2 suburbs away from where you
Yes,
are.
that's really funny. It's really funny.
It's yeah, the irony of that is definitely not lost on me. But yeah, the perspective at the time, and I had friends ask me, it's like, how are you
And did
letting?
she, and by the way, did she go?
Yeah, she did. She did. We had no idea how long. We had a rough idea of a 12 months. She went for about 10 and a half months in the end. She came back actually, touch wood, for my birthday, which was a beautiful surprise. But yeah,
Came back with mine?
she came back for my birthday,
Oh, you're
which is very sweet of her. But yeah, it was a beautiful time for her, very rich time for her. And actually, I still reap the benefits of that time she spent away, or not, and my friends used to turn around to me, and even my friends, quite awake and aware in many instances, they say, "How did you let her? Like, how are you letting her go?" And I still remember having challenges with the phrasings of the terms. I was like, letting her go, like letting her, like let her, like she's her own. And you mentioned the word interdependence before. She's her own person, and if she's feeling like her cup isn't 100% full right now, you know, even from a selfish standpoint, like I would want her to go and fill that cup up and bring herself back full to the relationship.
so
Um,
she's lucky because another
which
person,
would,
male or female, would say, "That's too long. I can't do that." And they wouldn't be wrong, right? Because there's some people who would feel abandoned and feel lonely, and they know that, and they would not like it, right?
But that abandonment, isn't that putting yourself first? Like, when you look at each other as an equal, and this is where the question was, you know, I don't want to use the word egalitarian, but sort of having that sort of dual perspective of each other and vested interests at heart. For me, it was like, and I'm not saying I'm a master of relationships. I'm definitely not saying that. But, like, I think is that the kind of approach that you're alluding to there? Is like where I remember that being a visceral point in time where I literally felt like what's good for her is what's good for me. Like, if this is what she needs to go do, yes, it may be hard for me through a certain period. Like winter's going to be cold and miserable without the cuddles. Let's be real. But, she's going
Yeah,
to come back fuller and richer for it.
right. But you were able to do that. Not all people are able to do that. So the question is, in terms of PACT, secure functioning means that that we can set the relationship up any way we want. It's our design, our gig. This is our culture. We just have to agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying not everybody would agree, which means they'd have to work it out. So
Right.
you two were able to do that. That's terrific. But PACT or secure functioning is not one size fits all. It is people make their extraordinary arrangements given who they are and how they want to live. And if they can get each other to agree, that'll work. The problem is when they can't get each other to agree, then people start to beat up on each other if they don't have the ability to quit the relationship. That's a deal breaker, in other words. And if we can't let go of the relationship because we're, like we talked about earlier, we're pointing in two different directions. This is right, not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just we're too different to handle whatever it is we're planning. If they cannot see themselves as being able to say no deal, that's when people get aggressive and even violent. When they feel helpless and they don't have the option to opt out, right? So people would then have to work it out in a way that's good for both of them. How that would be, I don't know. Right? That's not my concern. My concern is that they have to do it.
Yeah. The word compromise comes up a lot when people start initially talking about relationship.
I don't like the word. Only because if you look it up in the dictionary, it's similar to bargaining, but compromise too often is I gave up something for you. And there's a sense of you owe me. And that often comes up. I compromised and look what I got. So I prefer people bargain and negotiate to get things straight and make each other whole before they do. So there's no looking back.
Because that was going to be my question initially, is like, does compromise happen on this side pre-pact, or does it happen once you've made your pact and on the other side? But what I'm hearing is learn to negotiate your needs through the journey.
These systems work best by my trying to get you sold on my idea, and you are trying to get me sold on your idea, right? And we're trying to see if we can come together and where we agree and where we are the same. That's skill, right? And let's say you want to go to vacation in the South. I want a vacation in the North. I like the climate there. Can we actually work together and make it good for both of us? Yes, we can. We just have to know that we have to do it, and then we'll do it. It's a creative project, right? So that's really what this is about. It's that I have to make sure we work together. I have to make sure that we're both okay. Otherwise, we're disturbing the peace. We're disturbing the future, and we don't want that, right? So we do it the proper way, which is a little harder, but in the end, easier. We have to work it out and come up with something that works for both of us, or we go back to the drawing board. That's a two-person system.
Getting it. Stan, domestic violence.
The two of you worked that out. Her trip, you worked it out.
Yeah. But I think that was really valuable as well to hear you say that that worked for us, and it wasn't actually for everybody else as well. It's like everybody's pact is their own.
Yeah.
One of my questions today was going to be around domestic violence and trying to understand a little bit around, and I think even in this conversation at this particular juncture, understanding that more of our relationships are based on survival than we give them credit for,
Yes.
maybe alludes into potentially where some of that toxicity emerges from. Is that your awareness of it? It's where our survival is threatened, that potentially people lash out in unreasonable means?
Yeah. First of all, we as human beings, because nature repeats itself, we do what we know under stress, and we do what we've seen and experienced. That's about as fancy as we get. So under stress, I'm going to do the things that I saw and that I experienced over what I think is best. That's again the human condition. So if I grew up with violence and abuse, or I saw it, I am more perhaps inclined under stress to do that. If I am somebody who is a passenger, never a driver, and I'm so passive that I never speak up for myself, and I start to feel an overwhelming amount of unfairness, I too can explode and do something I ought not to do. So a lot of this is predicted by our families of origin and what we saw and experienced. People just don't up and become violent. There's usually a history there. And as I said before, people become violent when they feel helpless. So helplessness is the big problem. If I feel helpless, I'm more likely to do something aggressive than if I didn't feel helpless, right? So that's often a case, or how domestic violence gets triggered. Sometimes it's alcohol fueled, which is the most dangerous, or drug fueled, or it's simply are periods when I feel too small, ashamed, and helpless. Might is right. I will go and I will square that situation with violence and aggression. So that's the problem there, along with problems with impulse control and so on. I know in Australia, there are very, very strict laws against spousal abuse or, relationship violence, and also children being exposed to that. Even a little more than it is here. And here it's pretty strict, but very strict to where you are. And I like that because I think people should be able to control themselves and not be violent. But yeah, that's a whole other can of worms there.
Yeah. Is it a blanket rule that you would instill in terms of if you're subject to such an environment, it's get out? Or
I always recommend.
That's your recommendation?
Yeah, there's no room for because a violent behavior is a precursor to murder. Domestic violence often does lead to murder, and if not murder, then a terrible accident. And so no place for it.
It's not worth it. Absolutely. One of the other really interesting questions I had coming into today's conversation, because when I speak to you, I find yourself very even, but also open-minded. And yeah, I think with relationships, I often end up finding when I'm speaking to people that they have a certain leaning. It's like monogamy's a certain way, or some people, and especially with people, I want to say, there seems to be more of a trend these days with people sort of bucking the norm of monogamy and sort of opening up and exploring polygamous relationships. I get triggered by it sometimes because they're doing it in the name of spirituality. And then it's like I'm exploring my spirituality by being with multiple partners and confronting all the darkness that comes up from all the agitation that I get from my partners about me being with other people. Sorry, I'm grossly generalizing there. But monogamy, polygamy, you seem to be neither here nor there on it.
I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
In case you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
If both partners want to do drugs and alcohol, I don't care either. I only care when somebody doesn't want, right? If they don't agree, then that's when I care. right? Because then it's not a fair system. So, so who am I to say what is right or wrong, good or bad? It's not to my taste, but there are a lot of things that aren't to my taste. This is about what you want, not what I want. This is about what you want and how the two of you operate. I've worked with couples that are kind of criminals. As long as they're not doing anything to me, I'm fine. As long as they're not ripping each other off, I'm fine. But generally, people who are really good with each other, compassionate, considerate, they understand how this works, are generally better to people outside of that orbit as well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I only care that they are doing this well and by agreement, thoughtfully, honestly. That's what I care about. People have all different ways of living their life
and navigating that. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I just wanted to sort of, yeah, I guess there's a interesting sort of question that emerges, is like, do you find more issues in one-on-one relationships or polyamorous relationships? But I'm sure the concerns that are presented are unique to each individual relationship that presents, and it's got nothing to do with how many people are in the dynamic. It's just the dynamic, right?
Yeah, it's a factor of numbers. I mean, the more people, the more complicated. And so the more organized they have to be, the more they have to think, predict, plan, and prepare for what could possibly go wrong. And so as long as that organization is there and the people are thoughtful, then fine. But that's harder to do as the numbers grow. Right? So it takes a little more work.
For those that do want to get organized around their relationships and are intrigued by the PACT approach, what's the best place that you would recommend for them to get started?
To go to the PACT, it's thepactinstitute.com. There they can reach me. They can do trainings. We do trainings worldwide. We've trained in Melbourne many years. And we also, this started off as training, because I'm a professor, teacher, started off as training therapists. And then we started to go to the public, and we've been doing couple retreats for the last 10 years. And we do them now mostly online post-COVID. We're doing them all in person. But now we do them online, and we do about 4 to 6 a year.
Amazing.
So people can find that online, and that's led by my wife and I, Tracy.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put the link to that in the show notes below. And also, there's a book coming out called In Each Other's Care this year. Or this year, the next year, soon.
Beginning of next year.
Yeah,
it's
approaching 2023.
It's a pretty big book, and this one is organized by complaints. So every chapter is organized around money, sex, family, children, stepchildren, all sorts of issues that are common that I've seen come through my clinic over the 30 years. And so it's kind of fun, and it's a go-to your problem kind of book.
I like this look. I was like, I'm fuming. What's my fumes? What color are my fumes? I love that. Stan, I'm going to ask you before I let you go today does it put a lot of pressure on you in your relationship with Tracy to be the relationship guy? Like, how do you carry that?
We actually have to walk our talk, otherwise we look like phonies. And so I will say that secure functioning relationships, which I believe are the only way to ensure a long-lasting, happy relationship, is really simple and elegant. It's common sense. It's just really hard to do because it takes planning, it takes discipline, it takes character, but it takes working together jointly, collaboratively, and cooperatively at all times. And we're, famously happy. And I'm a difficult person, so none of this is easy for me. But I do it because I can and because it's a better life.
Mm, mm. Stan, thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly and so freely. And just, yeah, I know it's not just today that we get to have this conversation, it's a lifetime's of work that informs this conversation. So thank you so much. All the way from all your awkwardness as a kid to developing all the tools and all your work
Yes.
with Tracy and like being here today and really just, yeah, it's such a gift. Yeah, it's such a gift. And
What's your wife's first name?
Kay, yep, her name's Kay. Yeah.
Try looking at each other for extended period tonight, gazing at each other and exploring each other's face. You probably haven't looked deeply and carefully at details at each other's face for some time. We actually store a picture of each other's face and we don't look. We think we know, we don't look because of the automation process.
Yeah.
Try that tonight and see what happens.
I will actually, and I've been in researching your work as well, even just where those little bits where like, we sit next to each other a lot, but not necessarily face to face, and how arguments happen with the biology and stuff. Guys, Stan's work's really interesting. Please do take a deeper look under the hood.
Always face to face when you're in trouble, never side to side.
Yeah.
Really blind on the sides. Dangerous to do.
Thank you so much again for doing this episode.
Thank you.
And on behalf of myself and the Inspired Evolution audience, Tribe, thank you so much for listening in. Wishing you all the best on your way forward.
Same to you, Imrit.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment, and if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.